Good morning, and I'd like to welcome you all here. You are an extraordinarily brave audience, but we've done this before. It seems like there's something about Haiti meetings and inclement weather that seem to go together. But I think it's all designed to punish us because it'll probably make you all feel better to know that in Port-au-Prince this morning it's sunny and 82 degrees. My name is Bob Perito. I'm the director of the Haiti program here at the United States Institute of Peace. This is a public forum to consider the question of, can elections save Haiti? If this is your first visit to our beautiful building, the United States Institute of Peace is a congressionally funded institution dedicated to the peaceful resolution of international conflict. And for those of you that might be wondering, the building is a result of a public-private partnership and was built with congressional appropriations and with very generous contributions from corporations and from the public. The United States Institute of Peace Haiti program began in 2006. Our first event, our first panel presentation was in February of that year, and we were discussing the contested election of President Preval. Over the years, the program has presented a regular series of public forums on issues related to Haiti and U.S.-Haitian relations. The program has also conducted field programs in Haiti to train community activists, parliamentarians, and government officials in methods for peaceful conflict resolution. We have run programs that worked on reducing gender-based violence, on reforming Haiti's antiquated legal code, and on the UN's effort to crack down on gangs in Port-au-Prince. In 2007, in a speech on Constitution Day, Haiti's then president, Raymond Joseph, declared that Haiti's constitution posed the greatest single threat to his country's long-term stability. Preval pointed out that the vaguely worded document, with its proliferation of government offices and oversight groups and its requirements for yearly elections, was simply more than a country with Haiti's limited resources to support. Following Preval's speech, the USIP Haiti Forum convened a public gathering just like this one, and we considered the question, which was largely humorous or tongue-in-cheek: should Haiti violate its constitution one last time, i.e., and fix things? The serious issue behind that kind of humorous title was, could Haiti find a way to shift the focus from the Constitution's requirement for frequent elections and complex political processes onto the provision of good governance? Preval's effort to provoke a debate on the Constitution ended in the same speech when he called for amending the Constitution to make multiple presidential terms possible, and critics immediately claimed that the speech was simply an opening of an effort by Preval to succeed himself, and so serious discussion ended there. But 6 years later, the problem of the Constitution's complex mechanisms for organizing elections has not gone away. Over the years, Haiti has lurched from one election crisis to another election crisis, including one that simmers at the current moment. Again, we are faced with the question, can elections save Haiti? Or is there a way to shift the focus away from contests for office to the provision of good governance? This morning, we have a distinguished panel of experts to discuss this issue and the current state of U.S.-Haitian relations. I would like to introduce Professor Robert McGuire, who is chairman of the Department of Caribbean and Latin American Studies at George Washington University. Professor McGuire is a former USIP senior fellow, and he will moderate this morning's panel and introduce our speakers. Bob?
Thank you very much, Bob, and good morning, everyone. I'm glad you could make it this morning. Bob didn't mention this, but I just wanted to reiterate, if you do have your cell phone on, if you could just silence it, that would be a good idea. Just a couple of comments from me. I'm not a major speaker here, so just a few quick things, and they'll reiterate some of what Bob has said. In particular, I think we've all been thinking of former President Raymond Joseph's 2007 remarks that the Constitution has been an impediment to Haiti's democracy. Preval pointed out the frequency of the elections and the contorted Electoral Commission creation process as part of that problem. Since 1987, elections and the formation of an electoral council, better known as a CEP, have been highly problematic, starting with the 1987 election massacre and continuing through the highly controversial 2010-2011 presidential election process. Elections seem to have brought out the worst in Haiti's politicians and leaders, as factions plot and struggle for control of the electoral machinery, which helps considerably for them to gain control of the ballot box, the ultimate goal in Haiti's winner-take-all politics. Haiti's people have reacted variously to their country's elections. Sometimes, particularly as we saw in the presidential elections of 1990 and 2006, they have turned out massively, waiting in long lines to cast their ballot. Other times, such as in the 2010-2011 presidential elections and more typically in off-year parliamentary and local elections, turnout is poor. In the meantime, Haiti's people have seen that elections seem not to have much of an effect on improving their lives. Twice they have seen a popularly elected leader forced from office. Always they have seen their expectations that elected government will help them improve their lives dashed. As Bob outlined, Haiti now faces another episode with elections, one that's already highly problematic, even though not a single vote has been cast. Indeed, there's not yet an electoral commission or electoral laws. So we pose the big question: can elections save Haiti? And within that question, we ask a series of sub-questions that include whether or not yet another round of elections, albeit delayed ones, will lead the country to an unhalting path towards social and economic progress for all of its citizens, especially the 78% who struggle to make ends meet on $2 a day or less. We have 4 speakers to address this topic. All of them have stellar credentials. You have their bio. I would just mention 1 or 2 points to highlight them in the order that they will be speaking. First, we will hear from Jonathan Katz, the author of the recently published The Big Truck That Went By: How the World Came to Save Haiti and Left Behind a Disaster. Jonathan first went to the region in 2006 to the Dominican Republic under the auspices of the Associated Press. He went to Haiti in 2007 and stayed there until 2011, and of course he does return time and again even now. Our next speaker will be Mark Schneider. Many of you know Mark. He's certainly a well-known figure in Washington, back from the 1970s when he worked with Andrew Young and took his first visit to Haiti in, what was that, 78. Mark is currently with the International Crisis Group. He joined the International Crisis Group in the spring of 2001 as the Senior Vice President. And among other things, Mark has been the Director of the Peace Corps from 1999 to 2001, and Assistant Administrator of the U.S. Agency for International Development. When was the year in that, Mark?
93 to 99.
93 to 99, okay. Our third speaker will be Ambassador Raymond Joseph, also well known in Washington, and particularly became known from 1990 to 1991 when he was Haiti's chargé d'affaires in Washington and its representative to the Organization of American States during the interim government headed by Urte Pascal Trio. Ray came back to Washington in 2004 as Haiti's ambassador to the United States, where he stayed until 2010. Ray has been a resident of the United States for a long time. In fact, from 1970 to 1974, he was a financial writer with the Wall Street Journal. And most recently, he has founded an organization called A Dollar a Tree for Haiti, which is a nonprofit environmental organization registered in Maryland. Our last speaker, even though the chair is empty, will be here. That's Ambassador Thomas Adams. We understand that he is on his way from the White House, so perhaps he'll have something interesting to share with us in that regard. But Tom Adams was named the Special Coordinator for Haiti in September of 2010. He has worked closely over that time with former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and her Chief of Staff, Cheryl Mills, and runs the Haiti Special Office in the State Department, which has a staff of some 20 people. So each speaker will have 15 minutes to state his case. The presentations will be followed by a discussion sparked, we hope, by your concise and precise questions, and I will moderate that discussion. We will begin with Jonathan Katz.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much, Bob. Thank you for having me here. It's the 5th day of spring. It's Erev Passover. There's about an inch of snow on the ground, so I guess anything is possible. That said, if the question is, can elections save Haiti, I would say that my repertorial answer would be no, at least not by themselves, and certainly not in the way that they've been conducted now. But like I said, you look out the window, you never know. If you look at the track record of elections in Haiti, especially recently, the problem is that we in the United States, especially here in the city of Washington, often have a very almost fetishized view of the importance of elections as acts, but aren't always quite as concerned about the way that those elections are actually conducted on the ground in Haiti. The 2010 election, which then went on into 2011, was a very stark example of that, and we can talk about that a little more later. There have been a number of problems with elections in Haiti over the years, as has been discussed already in the panel, and I'm sure will be repeated ad nauseum before this is over. There has never been an election held in Haiti fully under the grounds set forth by the 1987 Constitution. There is still a want of a Permanent Electoral Council as called for under the Constitution, and the way that the Permanent Electoral Council is being structured now may not also fit with the way that it was envisioned originally by the National Assembly in 1987. Despite that, there's often a lot of pressure to push for elections to happen anyway. So again, going back to the last set of elections that put in the people in power who are now fighting over how to conduct the next set of elections. It was 2010. It was just a couple of months after the earthquake. An initial set of elections that had been scheduled for February of 2010 were canceled for obvious reasons. There's absolutely no way that an election was going to be held a month after the disaster. But even still, in November of 2010, when the presidential elections were scheduled, it was very unclear how election was going to be able to be held. The voter rolls were bloated with the names of untold thousands of earthquake dead. Voter registration cards weren't being properly printed and distributed to the living. Polling places were destroyed. It was very clearly going to be a mess, but there was an insistence on the part of the international community that the elections be held on time. And I should say that this was not without echo within the Haitian populace. There were many people who were also worried that, for instance, President René Préval might overstay his term or just cancel the election entirely and declare himself dictator, even though that certainly didn't seem to be President Préval's style. Nonetheless, there was that concern, but the concern seemed to be much more heightened in the halls of the Organization of American States, in the State Department, and elsewhere outside of Haiti. And there was a thought put forward by the Haitian anthropologist Michel Roff-Trouillot about why this focus on elections is so paramount outside of Haiti, and especially coming from halls of power such as those here in Washington. And he was writing decades before this, so he wasn't talking specifically about 2010, but it absolutely applied then, and it may also apply now in 2013. He said, well-intentioned observers reduce Haiti's problems to a matter of procedures of access to political power. In its humblest expression, this position suggests that once a president is selected through free elections, and he puts free in quotation marks, Haiti will be on the road to democracy. But then I write in my book that this is not necessarily true, that prioritizing elections in a weak state with no effective legal system, a lack of access to institutions for the poor majority, and civil society dominated by a tiny self-interested power class can never create democracy in its best sense. Instead, it will create what another scholar of Haiti, Robert Faton, has called predatory democracy, in which those with wealth and privilege exploit the trappings of elections and parliamentary procedures. So one of the more notable aspects of this, the way that it presents itself when the elections are actually being held, is that first of all, because of the lack of a permanent electoral council that's responsive to the people, which often puts far, far too much power for actually organizing and holding the elections into the hands of the ruling party. And that was definitely a problem in 2010 with the unity party of President Preval, which, for those of you who don't know, manifested itself by the declaration of a second round in which basically the president's man, Jude Celestin, was going to go on and face the ostensible leader in the vote, getting Mirlan Manigat, much to the chagrin of supporters of Michel Sweet Mickey Martelly, who was thusly ousted from the race. And of course, if you know about Haiti now, he's now president, so something happened in between. And what happened in between was basically an explosion of, for lack of a better term, riots. There was some peaceful protesting going on, but the Unity Party headquarters was also burned to the ground, so evaluate as you will. That's a clear problem in the way that these elections are constructed. Also, what ends up happening is these largely unaccountable electoral councils have had a habit of excluding parties from participating in the first place before the elections are even held. Now, the loudest protests often come from members of the Lavalas party of former President Jean-Bertrand Aristide, as well as their supporters in the United States. But there are a lot of parties who get excluded, or at least a lot of potential candidates, since the party system tends to be fairly disorganized. But this is an issue because this is part of the problem of the difference between elections and democracy, for, to put it bluntly. The problem is that if everybody isn't participating, if the population doesn't feel like all of their potential choices at least have a fair chance of getting to participate in the election, then it doesn't really matter if they're given a chance to vote or not, because they may not feel that they're given a chance to vote for the candidates that they would want to see. And I'm not taking the position, as is sometimes taken, that the only party of the people is Famille Lavalas, and that if Famille Lavalas can't participate, then that is a clear sign that there isn't a good election being held. It's not totally clear whether still in 2013 Lavalas remains the most popular party in Haiti, as it has often been called in the past. Nonetheless, they do have quite a lot of support, and they haven't been allowed to participate in an election for quite a long time. And that's an issue. That's something that needs to be dealt with. And it's really something that needs to be dealt with, and this is something that all discussions about Haiti have in common, by the Haitian people themselves. It needs to be power put in their hands, and that's essentially what Trudeau was talking about as well. He's saying that these need to be decisions that are left up to the Haitian people. There needs to be a sense that democracy is being created from the local level and that it is growing outward, and then maybe having its ultimate expression in the election for a president or parliament, as we're hoping to see later this year. Also, obviously, the municipal elections have been badly delayed as well. And that's something that just has not happened in Haiti. Maybe there was a chance that it was going to be happening in 1987, but obviously that election was put to a quite unfortunate end. And since then, there have sort of been furtive attempts at creating fully the vision that was put forward in the 1987 Constitution. It's never really been accomplished. One issue, to be specific, was the pyramid structure for creating the Permanent Electoral Council, the ASEX, the Assemblée de Section Communale. The idea was essentially that from a very, very local level, people would be picking delegates to represent them, and then those delegates would select delegates at a higher level, and those delegates would select delegates at a higher level, and on and on and on through basically a federal-type system that would ultimately put forth nominees to be selected by the parliament, the judicial branch, and the presidency, and form this permanent council. And that's actually sort of a beautiful vision, because it would be really democracy working in a sort of overarching sense, where it would combine very local democracy with very national democracy. That doesn't seem to be what is being discussed right now in the current impasse between the legislature and the presidency in what will be the Permanent Electoral Council if a compromise can be reached. They're sort of picking their own nominees and putting them forward and debating over who they should be. And so, I mean, that's basically where I want to leave it, because that's how to answer the simple question that's been put forward to the panel here. Can elections save Haiti? The only way in which elections can actually be the answer that moves the country forward, that actually allows Haiti to start determining its own destiny and being able to make decisions for itself, is if those elections can fairly represent, to the closest extent possible, approximable under democracy, the will of the people. And that means that the elections have to actually reflect what people want, the choices that they want, the candidates they want to see, and then ultimately the candidate who they vote for, not decided through sort of a half-hearted stab at here are the best, 19 guys, and you can sort of pick, the top 3, and then we'll pick the top 2, and then you have a riot, and we'll pick a different top 2, and the Organization of American States will come in with a report that says, well, it's actually not these 2, it's these 2. Can you pick from these 2 instead? And then we end up with a president and a parliament who hate each other and aren't necessarily beloved by their own people, either of them. That doesn't seem to be what has worked in the past, and it is probably not what is going to work in the future. So if elections are going to save Haiti, then things have to be done in a very different way. And I think that really begins, since we're having this conversation in Washington, with changing the way that we see what we want from Haiti from the outside. And insofar as we have the power, because we absolutely do, to impose our will, that we make sure that our will is imposed in such a way that it is going to help the Haitian people express their own.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Mark, it's your turn.
Once again, let me express my appreciation to the U.S. Institute of Peace and Bob Perito for continuing the focus on Haiti and for inviting me to participate in this distinguished panel on Can Elections Save Haiti? As Jonathan said, the answer is quite simple. The answer is no. Elections cannot save Haiti. However, the failure to hold elections will doom Haiti to permanent failed state status and its people to undeserved misery, the highest levels of infant, child, and maternal mortality in the Americas, and the lowest levels of literacy and educational achievement. Those facts underscore why Haiti's salvation will not come simply by holding these long-delayed elections. However, until the elections are held, there will be virtual stalemate in government in Haiti. In the absence of clarity whether constitutional government will function in Haiti, new private investment will hesitate to make long-term commitments. There's even danger that Haiti would return to rule by executive decree if the Senate loses another third of its members by early next year. If that occurs, the remaining international commitment to Haiti's recovery is likely to wither. And President Michel Martelly's hopes for a successful presidency will be buried amid the failure of Haiti's elites, economic and political, to reach any consensus on meeting the nation's monumental challenges. That's why the International Crisis Group published its report last month entitled Governing Haiti, Time for National Consensus. I think that there are copies now outside on the table on your way out if you'd like to get them. The report essentially tracks the failure of will across a broad spectrum of Haiti's national leaders to reach a governability pact for the country to move forward. The most recent triumph of partisan over national interest has been the failure of President Martelly, parliamentary leaders, and the business community to implement the governance agreement signed on Christmas Eve with the support of an ad hoc ecumenical body, Religions for Peace. The pact would have sidestepped the catch-22 situation where the absence of a third of the 30 senators meant that the parliament was unable to name its 3 members to the 9-member Permanent Electoral Commission, which was supposed to organize the partial Senate elections, which should have been held in November 2011. The Christmas Eve agreement provided for a new consensual, and I emphasize the word consensual, transitory electoral college. Now, that would have enabled the removal of widely criticized CEP members who'd been named or were seen as partial to the president last July. The Secretary General of the UN issued a report to the Security Council 2 weeks ago in which he described the 6 members named by President Martelly by executive decree as, quote, widely considered illegitimate, unquote. 3 months have now passed since the Christmas Eve agreement, and it's still not been implemented. In this past week, in the first sign of movement, the legislature, with some dissent, sent 3 new names forward to the president to be appointed to this transitory electoral council, whose mandate would simply be to hold these long-delayed elections, and then it would step down and be replaced by a permanent electoral council. The president has asked the judiciary named members to the original CEP to step down and new ones to be submitted. He also must name his own new members. Essentially, Haiti still has no members formally in place at the agreed-upon transitory electoral college. Even then, once the members are named, Haiti still has no electoral calendar and no electoral law. Not only does the 16-month delay in holding elections hamstring the Senate, short a third of its members, but the legislature as a whole. And local government, as you've heard, also has been undermined because mayors and local assemblies, the CASEX, also should have been elected long ago. Instead, when the old terms were up, President Martelly and the executive branch unconstitutionally appointed individuals to those posts. When I was in Haiti in December, and I've been coming to Haiti virtually every year, if not several times a year, since 1978, I spoke to the people who technically are responsible for organizing the election. That is, the staff of the Electoral Council. Once this electoral body, this transitory electoral body, is in place and an electoral calendar and law approved, it still will take them at least 6 months to manage the technical and logistical operations to hold the presidential, mayoral, and community level elections. Now, the lack of decision on holding these elections, because this doesn't happen just willy-nilly. These are decisions that are made by political and economic elites for their own reasons, not to move forward and abide by the constitutional and legal requirements. And it reflects Haiti's zero-sum game political culture that prefers destruction of the opposition to any form of compromise. After the election, hopefully it will be held. And it will be held, and it will not be a perfect election. But it is absolutely essential. But then a national consensus must come together to design public policies with respect to security, corruption, and the rule of law. That pact could enable the country to start to realize the transformation that was promised after the devastating earthquake 2 years ago. Those reforms are critical to the economic investment and poverty reduction that Haiti requires. Private sector leaders, particularly the elite, must recognize their own responsibility to help shape that national consensus. And it must include their paying all the taxes they owe to provide the state the resources it needs to fund basic health, education, and infrastructure for its people and its economic well-being. Haiti remains a country of contrasts, illusions, and metaphors. The contrasts are between the families who live in the Pétionville estates and those who live in the gullies alongside the road that leads to those estates. The contrast also is in the investment of perhaps $3 billion since the quake. Yet Haiti actually dropped 3 spots last year to 161 of 187 countries on the 2013 UNDP Human Development Index. The illusions are of a country where those you ask outside its borders tell you that the national language in Haiti is French, and where many of those in the top echelons of government and business speak to you in English. The reality is that Creole is the language of Haiti. The metaphors of a glass always half empty. And for many of us who believe and have worked on trying to help build law enforcement institutions and a justice system where an impartial judiciary decides cases on the basis of evidence and law, regardless who the defendants are, the metaphor is Sisyphus. Another contrast. Haiti has 6,684 military troops and 2,614 police in the UN MINUSTA peacekeeping force. Haiti also has some 10,000 members within the Haiti National Police Force. Yet the Secretary General 2 weeks ago stated in his report to the Security Council that the overall security situation was relatively stable in the sense that there is no real armed threat to the nation state. But there has been an increase in civil unrest and major crimes. His report went on to note an upward trend in homicides, with a 33% increase during the last 3 months of 2012 compared to the same period 2011. And it cites as a major factor, and that's a quote, the recurrence of gang clashes. And again, I want to quote, some of which appear to be instigated by political actors, unquote. That is, that the political forces in Haiti continue to use violence for their own narrow self-interests. And the implications of that for political campaigns, voting, and counting the votes is clear. Kidnappings were up by a third to 18 a month when compared to 2011, and rapes on average rose from 33 a month in 2011 to 40 a month in 2012. And most analysts will tell you that both categories are severely underreported. Crisis Group's report emphasized, and this is a phrase that we heard throughout last year, the deficit of public confidence and the exclusion, as Jonathan noted, the exclusion of a majority of Haiti's citizens in any say about their future. The report called for the elites to start pursuing the national interest and for the international partners of Haiti to start demanding a governability pact that will start Haiti along a path of changing that political culture to one that reflects dialogue, compromise, and concert. And there are several Latin American examples that one can point to. The content of any national accord obviously would have to be decided by Haitians. President Martelly's 5 E's, employment, état de droit, education, environment, and energy would not be a bad place to start, along with accountability through transparency and execution. Implementation would be a continual consensual process and monitored by a widely representative body. Perhaps the best recent news is that last week at the Security Council, there was a unanimous message delivered to the government of Haiti. It was quit stalling on holding the overdue elections. That message was underlined by donors who refused to attend a scheduled reconstruction meeting last Wednesday in Haiti that the Haitian government had called. Essentially, they stated that a condition for their attending was the government coming up with a credible electoral body, an electoral calendar, and an electoral law. My only comment is that it is about time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Ambassador Joseph, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me here. Bob Perito, I thank you. I suppose I am the object lesson. That's why I'm here, especially since I come from Haiti, where I have been since 2010 when I resigned my post as ambassador here. Elections. Can Haiti be saved by elections? What is really elections? Elections is a mode to get power. In Haiti, you look at Haiti's history, over 200 years, the mode of getting power was coup d'etats, and the history is rife with that. I will come to elections not only back then, but not only back to 1986 when Jean-Claude Duvalier fled, but I want to take the election that led to him, the election of 1957. Francois Duvalier was elected, but, you know, to be elected, he had the army on his side. I think he was probably popular because he was a medical doctor who fought against yaws and had some popularity out there. However, to back it up, he needed the army. That's the way people took power in Haiti through 2 centuries. And before Duvalier, we had 2 elections where military, like Paul Magloire, took power in an election. Then Papa Doc comes in through elections. And what happened? He remained in power for 14 years. Before he did that, by 1961, he came in 57. By 1961, he had a second election. But you know how the elections happened? It was not an election for president. It was an election for deputies, congressmen, and Duvalier added his name to the ballot as the one who would see to it that the will of the people is carried out. When the ballots were counted, the committee that was in power then just added all the names of the winners and the total numbers, and they declared that the people had voted for President Duvalier, giving him another term even before his 6-year term came to an end. So that was the way they did their elections. Well, by 1964, Duvalier felt strong enough. Why don't we go for election for life? So they had an election, and whether the president should be there for life. Yes, everybody said yes. I think they may have had 1 or 2 no's, but it's the Electoral Council that decides. So Duvalier was president for life, 14 years. And the powers that be, including the United States here, international community, said nothing. They couldn't. They wanted Duvalier. They had to have him because this was the heart of the Cold War. During Cold War, you shouldn't have elections. And Duvalier was a bulwark, so that's what he calls himself, bulwark against communism. So he stayed until he died in his bed on the 22nd April 1971, although he didn't die on 22nd April 1971. But that was the power of the president. He was elected September 22nd, 1957. He took power. He was inaugurated October 22, 1957, and he became president for life. Another 22, April 22, 64. Everything is done on the 22nd. On 22nd of the month. So he had to die on the 22nd also. 22nd of April, 1971, which wasn't true. I bring this up because I tweet the government all the way. And since I knew that he had died long before that, a week before that, I got a friend of mine here in Washington, D.C., when they had the Washington Daily News to publish the news of Papa Doc's death on April 21st. And that happened. Well, Baby Doc comes in. He doesn't need any elections. His father anoints him for life. And he stays in power for 15 years. Still, the international community that is asking for elections today and all that didn't say anything. Well, after Baby Doc had to flee Haiti, then the new era of real elections started, but not before the military did their own things for about a period of 3 or 4 years. Finally, in 1990, Haiti had its first democratic elections. And till today, some of the Haitian politicians are accusing me of introducing the white man, the blanc, they call it blanc. Blanc is a white man, into Haitian politics because I signed the first agreement with the Organization of American States, Buenos Suarez, to have the first observers, international observers to Haiti in the election of 1990. And why did I do that? When Madame Trudeau called me in and wanted me to take over the embassy here, I said, Your Excellency, what do you want to do? And without batting an eye, she said, I want to have elections this year. That was end of March 1990. I said, well, elections this year, and when are you giving up power? We want to be out of here by February 7, 1991. Do you know that the first woman president of Haiti carried out her mission? The elections took place December 16, 1990. 8 months later. You'll find out why I'm telling you this now, because I'm coming back to that later. Those elections of 1990, I say, remain the gold standard of elections, where President Aristide won. But when he won, again, I wrote, we have the first democratic elections, but not a Democrat won. And you know what happened later? A coup d'etat 9 months into his presidency. And then you have these militaries again. Finally, he comes back in 1994 with U.S. troops. And just as all the other presidents before, he wanted to continue his power for a few years until the international community said, no, we were elected for a period that ends in 6 years. That's it, or 5 years. He arranged to have his friend to warm the seats for him, René Préval. But while René Préval was president, Mr. Aristide behind the scene controlled things until he organized a new election, which he won, but this time with very little participation. Only 10% of the people participated in the second election of President Aristide, but he won with more than 90%. So, was that a good elections? Elections still. Can elections save Haiti? Well, President Aristide is quote-unquote kidnapped on February 29, 2004, either kidnapped or voluntarily left. I say voluntarily left because he arranged for his family to leave the country in time. And when the American official came to get him to the airport, he was ready with his wife with quite a few suitcases. But be that as it may, his elections, where he won by 90% of 10% participation, didn't save him. And that's when they called me back again, because I worked in the elections of 1990, and we're going to have elections again, and they think they need somebody who knows Washington, who can work with the people here. I came in 2004. We worked diligently. Again, an interim government. In 2 years, the mandate we had, we carried out the elections. I contend that since the fall of the Duvalier dictatorship, only 2 interim governments carried out the elections in the allotted time. The governments who were elected always tried to keep power by one way or another past the allotted time. Elections to renew governance locally, as has been already said, expired in 2010, were prolonged till June 12, 2012. Yet in the fall of 2011, President Martelly gave assurances that they would be held, especially the community elections. Instead of elections, you've heard already what has happened. Early 2012, the Minister of the Interior began replacing elected officials whose term had ended with interim officials named by the executive. The executive went for the power grab, finally, of all local offices in July of 2012. So today, Haiti is governed by officials that are interim executive officials of the executive government, of the president. Are we supporting elections for them too? Shouldn't we have elections for them? When Mr. Avril, the general, held power in Haiti in 1988, 89, and to 90, when he was ousted, I went to him, talked to him. I said, you have enough power with the army. I'm proposing something. Why don't you start having elections at the local level? I suggest that today, that elections could be held at the local levels where the people know the individuals that are running. And if we do that, and if he did it, I think we would have already the basis for real elections nationally. As things stand now, I cannot say that elections will save Haiti, at least not the elections that will be coming. I'll tell you why. You have heard Mark Schneider explain what the United Nations said. They insist that we should have elections. You have heard the other speakers. But I'll give you a little example of why I don't think democratic elections will occur. In June of last year, the prosecutor for Port-au-Prince, Jean-Renel Senatus, the prosecutor back then, said there was a break-in, or there was a theft, not a break-in. There was a theft at the office of the Electoral Council. 450 laptops disappeared. 207 extended computer memory cards disappeared. 88 portable batteries disappeared. 160 solar panels disappeared. These are equipment used by the Electoral Council to carry out the elections. There was no sign of the break-in. And since then, the prosecutor has been replaced. And I don't know what they have done about finding this equipment. You have the list. There's a lot of equipment here. So, I say, can elections save Haiti? What type of elections?
Thank you very much, Ambassador Joseph. Now we turn to Tom Adams, who I'm sure you have seen has arrived. Tom?
Thank you. Apologies for being late, but I'm glad I got here to hear most of your presentation, Jonathan, and the other presentations. Very interesting. I think, sometimes we're too hard on Haiti. Our expectations are enormous sometimes, and I think we have to sit back and take a fairer view. And I think if you look over the past 2 years, democracy and government in Haiti, progress is mixed. It's not all bad. On the positive side, we've seen the appointment of a new prime minister, increased representation of women in government, including in the cabinet, constitutional amendments to strengthen the rule of law and democracy. On the negative side, much of the first year of President Martelly's presidency term was marked by heated public differences between the executive and legislative branches. At times, each side seemed to go out of their way to pick a needless fight with the other. This seems to have abated recently, and there's a more productive relationship, although there's still flashes of the old animosity from time to time. But they do seem to be working a little bit better together. On the downside, as everybody has said, senatorial and local elections scheduled for really the end of 2011 or the beginning of 2012 have been delayed far too long. And the international community has been pushing for some time, but with slightly firmer voice recently to say they really need to try to hold these elections prior to the end of this year. I think it's not inconceivable that our goal as international partners, and that I think the Haitians want themselves, that elections become a routine, smoothly run element of Haitian civic life, is attainable. And I think this election offers an opportunity for significant progress in that regard. As terms of office expire and we await elections, Haiti continues to function, but in a less than ideal way. Probably the biggest handicap is only 2/3 of the senators are legitimate. Makes it hard to get a quorum, get business done. Municipal governments operate, but in some cases with appointed, not elective mayors, and in other terms, in other cases with democratically elected mayors whose terms have expired. A lot of important legislation that needs to be passed has yet to materialize in areas such as business reform, anti-money laundering, criminal code reform, and anti-human trafficking. And nobody really is satisfied with the status quo. No one really should be. And people are asking, well, with so many of these other pressing issues facing Haiti in terms of job creation, food security, on inadequate health services, just to name a few, why all this emphasis on elections? And I think the response is that a properly functioning democratic institutions really do translate citizens' preferences as expressed through voting and concrete action. I think the presidential elections of 2010, Haitians really did want a change in their presidency and got to express it perhaps somewhat imperfectly. Wasn't the perfect election, and as someone has said, it's going to be a long time before there is a perfect election in Haiti. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try to hold elections. I also think, and I draw this from my experience when I worked, when I was the assistance coordinator for Europe and Eurasia, and I was in charge of our assistance to all the countries that emerged from communism. Often, and I'm not saying this is necessarily the case in Haiti, but often the center was rotten in many of these post-Soviet states. The executive and the parliamentarians were not really ruling on behalf of their people. And one of the more effective ways to get competition in there, political competition, was to go local, work with local mayors, local councils, strengthen them. And people can see when there's an honest mayor who's delivering services, that person will get more political power and eventually challenge the center. Haiti needs the same kind of democratic competition. And the Haitian people really need to hold their politicians accountable. That's what I speak to a lot of groups of young Haitians, students who come here and so forth, and that's the one thing I like to tell them is hold your politicians accountable. It's not always easy when the choice is between two fairly rotten candidates, which is unfortunately often the case. But I think democracy is important, and I would contend that much of President Martelli's effectiveness stems in no small measure from his success in democratic elections. And he still ranks very highly in public opinion polls. He still has 70% of people who say he's doing a good job. It used to be 70% saying he's doing a very good job, so he's slipping a little bit. But still, that's natural in almost any country. You see that with President Obama and others as well. Parliament's image is similarly linked to this sense of legitimacy and really how well they act on citizens' priorities. And even at this stage, you do see pressure from parliamentarians to take care of their constituents, which is good. I was at a police summit a few months ago, and they said, we want more cops in the rural areas. There are no police out here. Farmers get their crops stolen. There's nobody to go to. We need more and better police and other things. And the voices are clear in a lot of areas. These are going to be complicated elections. There are going to be hundreds of candidates because you have not just local mayors, but you also have local councils and other things. So this is going to be an extremely complicated election to hold. But it's important that they do so. Needless to say, the international community is willing to help. We've already deposited money into a UNDP election basket so they can start replacing these computers. And it wasn't just computers, there were also checks stolen and cashed and other things that need to be investigated. And I think they are, to some extent, looking into these. But best guess is this was an inside job. I'll leave it at that. We are willing to help. I think another thing is this initiative to include more women in government is running over into senatorial and parliamentary elections. Again, from my experience in Bosnia and the Balkans after the war, the election of more women has a very good effect on governments usually, and we need to help Haitian women have more participation in government. We're designing and implementing several programs to do that. Again, though, I should point out we are not the imperial United States we perhaps once were in Haiti. And I often get people who tell me, you must make the Haitians do X, Y, and Z. Nobody at this table does that, but maybe Mark. But we don't treat the government of Haiti like a vassal of the United States. They don't always do what the international community wants. Preval certainly didn't with regard to elections, with regard to the urging that Fanmi Lavalas be included, and other things. I don't think anyone should expect the Haitian government to do exactly everything that the international community asks of them. But I do think there has been a lot of progress in Haiti in the last year, hard-fought and hard-won progress that they can build on. And they need to get on with the elections and then make Haiti an easier and more predictable place to do business. They need to update the criminal code, which is hopelessly out of date. And USIP has done a lot of good work on that. It's time for them to pass that. It needs to have anti-money laundering legislation. There's a lot of money laundering goes through Haitian banks that needs to stop. And Haiti also needs to enact some legislation that will deter human trafficking and other human rights problems. These highlights aren't exhaustive, but I offer them as examples of some of the priorities that will need attention of Haiti's elected officials. In summary, let me just say a couple of things. One, Haiti needs to hold these elections. I think that's the consensus of this group here. And more broadly speaking, Haiti will lose international support if it is seen as undemocratic, sliding into increased corruption, engaged in gross human rights violations, or in permanent electoral political gridlock. Donors are just going to say, get fed up and go away. And that's the real danger here. It's not any one thing that's going to tip the scale. But overall, the international community has to help Haiti in these areas and nudge them in a better direction. And I think there are some positive things in all of these areas. I think the Duvalier trial is fascinating, for example. But it also needs to, while I'm a great believer in elections, Haiti has too many elections. There was a constitutional amendment that was going to rationalize them, hold them less off, and it didn't pass. I think I've been told at least that because there's an awful lot of pork that comes out in elections. They hire a lot of people. They get cars. They get paid to administer elections. They get paid to monitor elections. And I think that was probably the main reason that they weren't rationalized. They need to take another stab at rationalizing them and not hold elections every year. And then, as I've said, and I keep saying this to all the Haitians really need to hold their public officials accountable through elections. And I think they can. I think they already have. And that's really why elections are important there. So I'll stop here now because I always think the more interesting part of this are the questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Adams. We do have ample time for Q&A, but before we move to that, I just want to ask the other panelists here if you have any comment that you'd like to make before we move to Q&A.
Thank you all. Those presentations were very interesting. The one question that I have is that you say that the United States is no longer the imperial United States, that we don't impose our will on other countries, but I would be interested to hear how you would put in context the actions of the United States in late 2010 and early 2011 with regard to the last set of elections. I mean, it is arguable that the election was really decided essentially when Secretary of State Clinton came to Haiti and met with the principals and insisted to the Preval government that the Organization of American States report be enforced. Just to bring everybody up to speed, as I'd said, a different two candidates than the one who is now president were selected to go on to the second round, which was originally supposed to be held on January 16th of 2011, when instead of an election, Jean-Claude Duvalier came back to Haiti. That's a side note. But the Organization of American States came in late 2010. A technical team brought ostensibly at the request of the Preval government and came up with a formula in which they were going to resolve the question of fraud and who should actually be going on to the next round. The problem was that the election itself in the first round was halted at midday, essentially. All the major candidates, except for President Preval's chosen successor, more or less, Jude Celestin, protested and said that there was major fraud going on and the election couldn't continue. And so it was a very incomplete vote. As I had said before, there were a lot of problems in the registration process and the way the votes were being collected. But despite all of that, the OAS came through and the technical team said, look, we've sorted this all out and we've decided that it should be these two guys. And I can go into more detail about the formula, but it really doesn't matter. Essentially, they just said, look, it should be these two guys. We've added up the numbers and we add them up differently than you. And even though both of those two guys, one of them was a woman, had previously said that the election shouldn't continue at all, once they were informed very early on, basically by Emma Moulet, the head of the UN peacekeeping mission in Haiti, and then obviously once the OAS report came out and said, actually, you two are the ones going on, they said, oh, wait, actually, you know what, we changed our mind. Maybe we should keep going. And essentially the method by which that report came into force was through the intervention of the Secretary of State. And so I guess that's my question. It seems that the United States has imposed its will in the recent past, and in many ways, the current political situation in Haiti is one of Washington's choosing. And I was just wondering if you can jibe those two things.
Sure, and you know, I wish we did have that kind of power. But the truth is what really happened was in the December elections, there was a lot of violence. 10% of the polling places had to close because of violence. There was a lot of fraud reported, and it was clear that from other sources that this was not a free and fair election. I think that was everybody's consensus. But the dimensions of that were not clearly known, and it took quite an effort to convince President Preval. It really, I would like to, love to take all the credit for that for the United States, but the reality is there were riots, as you said, after the elections. There were 50 MINUSTA vehicles burned, 29 MINUSTA soldiers seriously injured, something like that. I may have the numbers slightly wrong. Mark can correct me. But MINUSTA, the Brazilians and others, didn't want to be seen as protecting a rotten, corrupt, and undemocratic Preval and having these riots get worse. So there was concern on the part, and I think key it wasn't just the United States that protested. It was a broad consortium of nations, including Brazil, which was a very important actor in this. I think in some ways more important than we were, because they speak for the troop-providing countries in MINUSTA there. And certainly, while we do not impose our will in an imperial manner, we do forcefully let them know our views from time to time. I don't want you to think we don't. Preval reluctantly agreed. Between Christmas and New Year's, we got a team of OAS election experts, really world-class electoral experts, go down and look at, and they could just tell from a packet that it was horribly corrupted, and some of my friends out here who had experience in that can explain the details. But in the end, it was pretty clear from their studies that it was Madame Manigat who led, followed by Martelli closely. And again, the government of Haiti accepted that. But I think, the bottom line was the people of Haiti really did want change from Preval. Preval, after the earthquake, I think he had a good first 4 years in many ways on human rights and other things. But his last year, he was traumatized by the earthquake, and I think he kind of crawled into a shell. And what energy he had, he was spending on trying to get the election won for his party. And so, people say, well, only in the second round, only 25% of Haitians voted. So it wasn't really legitimate. But, we have elections with low turnout here, and we consider them legitimate. I think it was legitimate. I think Martelli was legitimately elected. And we need to, imperfectly perhaps, we need to improve upon that. Does that answer your question? All right.
Ambassador Joseph, and then following Ambassador Joseph's intervention, we'll turn to you.
Ambassador Adams, you admit that all these equipment disappeared in Haiti, which is not a major country like the United States, or and no investigation has revealed where these equipment went, and you think this prepares us to accept what's going to happen next? You're going to buy new equipment again without finding out what happened to these? There was no break-in, really.
Well, it's not up to the United States to investigate crimes in Haiti. We assist the Haitians when they ask us for help. We're providing a lot of assistance to Haiti. But I think you've seen in the last few weeks, this hasn't gotten perhaps as much press as it should, but there has been a real effort on the part of Laurent Lamotte and the ULCC, Colonel Al Touris, to file more cases of corruption and investigate more things. They are tackling this in an organized fashion. I don't know if they've targeted, thank you, I don't know if they've targeted this. It should be fairly easy to track some of this stuff. I agree with you. Yeah. It's something we can certainly ask about when we're down there. I suspect there is some investigation going on this, but I don't know any details. It should be investigated, obviously.
The only thing I want to say is that the United States keeps putting money, and not only the United States, it keeps putting money because you want the system to work. However, there is no accountability how the money is spent, or when the money is spent and it's stolen right under our eyes like that. The only thing we say, well, we put some more money for better elections. We have to buy more equipment. If you put out the money, I think there should be an accountability.
Oh, I agree. Listen, on accountability, I think the international community that provides about 60% of Haiti's budget, we often get beaten about the head and shoulders donors for not giving more money directly to the government of Haiti. And the reason, pure and simple, is because the accountability isn't there yet. The procurement systems, the audits, et cetera. Actually, there are 2 initiatives underway to help the government of Haiti do a better job of accounting for their money. But it's going to take a while to get the systems in place because of the weak capacity of government. But that is certainly one of the more shall I say, strident requests of donors to the government of Haiti, and particularly on the part of budget support donors. We're not a big budget support donor, but those that are, the EU and others, are asking for that.
Okay, well, I think Mark Schneider made the point that adding to the President Martelli's 4 or 5 E's should be an A, and that A being accountability. But I also think Mark made the point that there needs to be a will to find that way, I suppose you could say. So let's open up to the audience, please. Any questions you might have? There are 2 microphones here, which we would like you to speak into if you do have a question. And if you could proceed to the microphone, when you ask your question, we would ask that you identify your name and your affiliation. And please try to keep your questions as concisely as you can. You can direct them to either one panel member or to the entire panel. And as we get people hopefully gathering their questions, I have a question to ask, and I'm going to ask it first of Ambassador Joseph, who pointed out, I think interestingly, that 2 of Haiti's best elections were held under interim governments, which had a definite short time frame of existence, and they seem then to have less interest perhaps in having a government that would extend their time in office. You also then suggest that perhaps the way to start in Haiti with this election process, if I understood, would be to start at the local level where people can see and judge very clearly. But as several panelists have pointed out, there have been of late interim officials appointed at the local level by the executive branch, and we're assuming that those appointments are of people they know. So would you, well, what would be your position then in the local elections as to whether or not these appointed interim officials should be allowed to run for election? Are you suggesting that if they are banned from running for election, they may have less interest in trying to stack the deck and there may be more success locally?
First of all, my position is that at local level, you can have better control of the process. And if the elections that have been held in Haiti have been so scandalous, perhaps we should start a new model in the country and hold mayoral elections first, where people really know the candidates. And in this case, the ones who are interim government executives, local executives, should be barred. Or if they agree, they should run perhaps, and people see whether they've done some good work. But the control would be much better at the local level, and people would see the popularity very starkly. It would be a stark situation here. You know locally who is really doing his work. And if in that situation you were to come in and put someone over that person, then you'll have trouble. For example, I know I see Jim Morel here, who did some work in the northeast of Haiti after these elections. And what happened, the candidates that won those elections locally, supposedly, were all government officials. However, when the figures came in and when the Democracy Project did its studies, it showed that the central office just added 100 votes to that to the government officials. In a case, in at least 2 or 3 cases, they added 200 votes. So the fellow who had 15 and who had lost to the one who had 75 won by 215. Had we done the elections just locally and kept the situation locally, the guy who got 15 could not have come up with 215. I say we perhaps have to change the game in Haiti and begin with local elections. If you do that, I'm quite sure they'll be democratic.
Okay, our first question, Matt.
Thank you very much for your comment. Is Matt Tappel with the National Democratic Institute. Just a question I wonder if you have recommendations for the elections coming forward. What can we do? Participation and the election law that needs to be defined. What can we do about that's what could be done to improve the process so we can avoid repeating some of the mistakes that
I'll start. I think that you've raised a series of important questions. Initially, let's be clear, you have to have a credible electoral body, one that the people respect and have confidence in. And we're still, unfortunately, a long way from that. And with that kind of body, then you have a chance to ensure that the electoral law has greater clarity, particularly with respect to campaign financing restrictions, and also the women's participation now is required, and the electoral law should underscore that. I will say, however, that one of the things that I think that is important, and it goes to the comments both by the ambassador and by Jonathan, is to have local people involved and trained to do domestic electoral monitoring. And I think that electoral monitoring has to begin with respect to monitoring the access to publicity during the campaigns, and to ensure that there is at the very least a observation of the local, who's going to be managing the local electoral at the tables. And I still think that whatever is done internationally has to be in support first of effective domestic independent monitoring by local people, and then obviously international monitoring on top of that.
Just a quick thing. During the last elections, in the first round, there was a lot of violence, as you pointed out. The second round, there was very little. MINUSTA got a lot better. In the first round, both MINUSTA hung back. The first ring around the electoral polling places was the HMP, and the HMP actually relied on sort of contract security guys in the buildings who didn't do their job. In the second round, MINUSTA and the HMP were much more proactive, and there was much less violence. So I think they remember those lessons and hopefully will apply them. The downside is MINUSTA is a lot smaller than it was, but they try to arrange it so their rotations are such that they hold troops there when they're bringing in their replacements during the electoral period, so they have a surge to monitor that, and they'll plan that the same way. I think and this is NDI, did some efforts to train local electoral observers. We need to be better at that. there were ambitious plans last time, and they didn't really work out. We need to sit down and do a better job of training local monitors. I think on the positive side, we've seen all this churning over this transitional electoral commission, but I think the net result will be a very diverse body. And I think if there are shenanigans, one or more of them will scream about it, which wasn't the case with Preval's group. They were all very much helping to steal the election. So I think that's good. What I do worry about on Haitian elections is we do want people to yell loudly when there is fraud and corruption and so forth, but we also don't want them to cry wolf too often, and often that's the case. Every loser will say, I was cheated, when in fact they might not have been, and that's going to be always the challenge, is separating sort of the wheat from the chaff there. But, again, I think, as Mark said, a better electoral commission is the best place to start.
I will add something. Those elections of 2010, 2011, when they had the commission to come in and to look at the fraud, they only stopped at the fraud at the presidential level. And they did not do it at the legislative level. And that's the reason why you have the gridlock, because a lot of the legislators that were supposedly elected were not. But the international community said, well, we spent $29 million to have those elections. We're not going to lose it. We're going to cut the apple in half. We'll take care of the presidential elections. Well, we'll let the legislative go. And that's why you have the problem you have in Haiti right now.
I'm not sure it was so much of an apple as a baby. And I'm not sure that the Unity Party or President Preval would have gone along with the final recommendations of the OAS report had they not been allowed to go forward with the parliamentary results as they stood. But that was an impression at the time. But the one thing that I would say, and this isn't really a recommendation, and it's not even specific to elections because this is just true in general, is that there are way too many ideas that come into Haiti from the outside. And whether you want to use the word imposed or suggested or forcefully suggested or whatever you want to say, we often come in with our plans, and they may sound very good in this room, and they don't work on the ground. And they're not the same ideas that people who actually live in the country and have to live with the day-to-day realities in Haiti would come up with. I mean, one example are those communal assemblies that I was talking about, which is a very Haitian idea. It sort of resonates with the communal work aspects of the convened and a lot of Haitian traditions that are not typical in this country, and they're not an idea that we would come in with from the outside, most likely. But it's something that if that's what people still want, then perhaps that's the best way forward. I mean, there was a huge problem after the earthquake, for instance, in terms of a lack of communication between the international responders and the people who are actually living on the ground. Meetings held behind the security perimeter at the United Nations log base, held in English, at which ordinary Haitians couldn't participate, and even if they were able to somehow get through the security barriers, wouldn't have been able to understand because the meetings were held in English instead of Creole. And I think that the recommendations really shouldn't be coming from this panel. They certainly shouldn't be coming from me, but should be coming from the people whose country it is. And I think if there is one recommendation, it's that those channels of communication should be opened way, way up, and then those ideas should be given precedence over any ideas that we come up with.
Hey, I'm Elaine Zuckerman of Gender Action. My question is directed at Jonathan Katz, although I welcome other people's comments. And Jonathan, you just started answering my question, actually. I was going to say that I haven't read your book, The Big Truck. I can't wait to. I heard many media interviews. I'm thinking of Bob Edwards' interview with you for an hour, which was just awesome. And in particular, I was struck by the fact that it seemed to me that you expressed in these interviews quite an indictment of the foreign community's activity, of foreign aid in Haiti. And having said that, I was wondering whether you would propose, and here's where you started answering my question, elections in Haiti without any foreign support, intervention, meddling. And if there was no foreign meddling in Haitian elections, what do you think those elections would look like? And also, I wanted to kind of extrapolate that to the larger sphere of foreign aid in Haiti generally, which you wrote about, I know. So quite a big question.
I mean, that's
Thanks.
thank you for your question. I mean, that's sort of the big question, and that's something that that comes up a lot, especially when one criticizes the way that foreign aid has been done in the past. One of the obvious responses is, well, should we just stop doing it altogether? And generally speaking, and I think this is probably true in the political arena as well with regard to elections, the problem is that we're already, to use the poker term, pot committed. We've already been so involved going back such a long time. I mean, back to 1804, and certainly to the beginning of the 20th century with the U.S. occupation of Haiti from 1915 to 1934. And you just look at the more recent things that we're talking about here, including U.S. and the international community's involvement in the elections that brought the current administration to power. It's hard to imagine how we can just sort of jump back and shut everything off and say, okay, well, now you're on your own. Because in many ways, regardless, again, of whether we want to describe it as an imposition of will or an installation of a government or just a lot of influence, we do bear a lot of the responsibility for the current political situation in Haiti, for better and for worse. And so my answer can't possibly be that, everything should just be cut off and everything stopped and now you're on your own, because it wouldn't even be true. We would still be, in many ways, responsible for a lot of things that are happening. But it's a question of, in all of these different areas, of gradual change that has to be made. Taking your foot off the gas a little while lightly applying the brake, instead of stopping the whole thing short. But it really does come down to this question of whose country is it, and who needs to be in charge, and who needs to be making these decisions. I mean, American democracy has its own flaws within the United States, but it's our system, and it pretty much works for us. And if we have problems with it, we change it because it's our country. And we wouldn't want France to come into the United States and tell us, I really think that we saw the 2000 election, and really you guys need to start doing it like this. And you need to have a prime minister, and we wouldn't take to that at all. But the power dynamics are such that we're able to come in from the outside with our own ideas in Haiti, and whether we mean to or not, whether we're a bull in a china shop or we are sort of retaining some of the less salient elements of our imperial past, the things that we want often do happen. And so it has to be a partnership, and it has to be done in concert, and resources from the outside need to be combined with will on the inside. And it can't be something that's just, a needle scratching across the record. I'll just mix every metaphor that I have at once. But nonetheless, I mean, that's what I would say. It needs to be, the will of the Haitian people needs to be expressed, and democracy that takes root in Haiti needs to be Haitian democracy. And how elections fit into that is really up to them. And even sort of in the way that we formulate the question, and I use the word "save" in the subtitle of my book as well. How the world came to save Haiti and left behind a disaster, and I use it somewhat ironically there. And I think we sort of have to address it a little ironically, even in the question put before the panel: if elections can save Haiti. Haiti. It's not a question of saving this poor vulnerable child that's floating out to sea. It's a country with people and a very long history and a very proud history, and ultimately it needs to be done in concert, and the will has to be theirs.
Ambassador Joseph, I imagine you must be thinking something about that question.
Yes, I've been thinking. Yes, Haitians should manage their own affairs. And I think that will come when Haitians don't have to depend on the international community for 60% of its budget. Saying so, I will reiterate what I said before. If we really want to work for democracy in Haiti, let the villages, let the towns have free elections. And if there's any help that can be given, let it be given to the local communities, local governments, work out a deal so that it can happen. Because if you start at the local level, I'm quite sure it will finally permeate throughout the country.
Yes, sir, you have a question, please go to the mic. And let us know who you are as well. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm Pierre Rousseau. I'm a consultant, an independent consultant, but I used to be in Haiti. I worked in Haiti twice. The first time I was in Haiti was in 1987, just before the elections. So I was there, I lived the elections when I was in Haiti at that time. Then USAID kicked everybody out after the elections, canceled all the programs, and I came back in Haiti then in 1988 when Manigat was president. And then we went through all the coup d'etat, and Paul Avril took power in those days, etc. Then I went back to Haiti recently, 2 years ago, in 2011, went for an economic development program and sustainable environment. I'm an agronomist by training. I'm not a political science. It's not my area of expertise. But what I can say is that there is some ways that is being implemented in agriculture and technology development that can be applied in political science. And one of these things is what Ambassador Joseph was explaining, working at a local community. In agriculture, we develop these farmers' field schools, where the farmers identify their own constraint and find their own solutions. And something similar can be applied into political science. So that's one thing that I can ask, how can that be implemented in political science? The second question I have is, in the recent years that I was in Haiti, we had some meetings that was generated by the international community, Inter-American Development Bank and the Ministry of Agriculture. And they had a way of implementing agriculture in the North Haiti, Northern Corridor, through harmonization of activities. In other words, what they were trying to impose and try to find is to harmonize the different activities, different strategies that were put in place by the implementation agencies, and then how can that be implemented in a general, how can we find a common ground that will be applied everywhere into that area. Ministry of Agriculture had an excellent conference that I had in November last year in Cape Haitian, where there was really a carbon copy of the program that I was being implemented in the North Haiti. In the second phase, there was a conference set up by the Ministry of Agriculture in Port-au-Prince on cocoa project.
Excuse me, sir, could you get to the question?
They completely ignored the activities that we had and start from scratch. So in other words, how can the political science coordinate the two actions and not have them compete against each other? That was my second question. So first question was how to implement Farmers Field School principle into political science. Second question, how can you harmonize and take advantage of this harmonization of activities into political science?
I didn't want to come here to toot my horn, really, but you brought up something. Since I left here and went to Haiti, I started to look at what can be done when they ousted me out of the race for the presidency without any reason. That's the way elections in Haiti are done. You're not part of it. You're out of it. So since I lived abroad for many years, they thought I was just coming back to the diaspora. I stayed in Haiti, and I started to look, what can I do? You don't have to be president of Haiti. You don't have to be government officials to do something. And when I started to look, I saw the country becoming a desert. And I said, well, I will work in reforestation. But to work in reforestation, we set up the organization. We decided to work with the local communities, for the local communities to own the process. And if we do it that way, they will not have the animals eat the trees or cut it down to just thwart something that the USAID did in the 1980s. Yes, I think what you started with the local communities is the proper thing. And that's the reason I come back. I may sound like a broken record. Let's start with the local communities in governance also. Not only for agricultural development, but in political governance. I think it can be done if we push for it. And I think that's what will save Haiti, but not these elections that are so fraudulent all the time.
Yeah, just two quick comments. Two programs that work in this area are Feed the Future programs, and they work with local farmers. And farmers do need to band together in Haiti because most of them farm little 1 hectare plots, which are inherently inefficient. You know, you don't see 1 acre farms in the United States, for example. And also farmers, it's better if you get the local authorities, work with them so that they maintain. We're building a lot of roads. A lot of the problems in agriculture are the farmers can't get their crops to market, et cetera. So building new roads, but who's going to maintain those roads? We think it's better to have the local farm groups maintain them, and we'll provide money and support, but better than the Ministry of Agriculture. So you are right, it is better to decentralize agriculture. 60% of Haitians, I won't say they're farmers, but they live on the farm. And there's no work, there are no hospitals, there are no schools in many of these areas, so they all flock to Port-au-Prince, which exacerbates the reconstruction of that. So I think one of the challenges of Haiti, and it's enshrined in their post-Duvalier constitution, it's part of Haiti's own plan to rebuild its country. A lot of lip service is to decentralize governance, but somehow the money always seems to stay stuck in Port-au-Prince. And one program that we've done in a number of municipalities on our governance side is in San Marc and elsewhere is local governments have some revenue generating powers, selling land, but also things that are that they're entitled to. They're supposed to, when they raise this money, send it back to Port-au-Prince, the Ministry of Finance, and then it's supposed to come back to them. So we helped these towns raise more taxes and then helped pry the taxes back out of the Ministry of Interior. So they went back to the towns. And then these funds were openly discussed at meetings of the citizens. There was transparency in how this money would be spent. And this needs to be increased. These programs are very successful, and the municipalities continue on their own to raise more revenue and to discuss funding in a democratic way. But there's a lot more that needs to be done. There are parts of Haiti where the local government gets virtually nothing from the central government, and that needs to change.
Just a couple things. I guess in most of my development work, I've focused on how do you ensure that the voices of local communities are translated into national policies, and that the efforts to ensure that local community groups have the opportunity to define local needs, and those needs then are expressed both at local municipalities and up through the national political system, and then the public policies are designed to meet those needs, and I believe that. One of the problems, however, is that this goes to Ambassador Joseph's point. One of the problems in having local elections determine the not take place through the national electoral law and National Electoral Council is that that's the way it's provided for in the Haitian Constitution. And the problem is that changing to achieve local elections run locally will require constitutional amendments. And all I can tell you is that getting constitutional amendments adopted in Haiti is not easy. However, what you can do from today is you can have local community groups who press for their candidates to be named to run for local office, ASECs, COSECs, and municipal and mayors. And those community groups, if organized for this purpose, and they can be, and there are a host of community groups today in Haiti. I would guess that there isn't a commune in Haiti, and there are 140 communes, that doesn't have at least a dozen different community groups, some organized for health, some for agriculture, some for education. They can come together and press for candidates to run for office in their local communities. And ultimately, that can be a way to achieve the objectives.
I think this gives witness to something I tend to carry around with me from the Donors Conference of March 30th, 2010, this document here, which is called A Voice for the Voiceless, Voix pour Peuple. And it has recommendations on a new Haiti from focus groups from around Haiti's countryside. There are many, many local organizations that participated in this. The problem is, this is probably the least known document from the Donors Conference, and it's probably one that's not been really listened to. So I would recommend anybody here interested in these voices of the voiceless, Google this thing. It's there. And see what Haiti's people said ought to be a kind of a blueprint for the country after the earthquake.
Could I add, when we, in the report that we put out, and when we talk about having the national leadership, economic, political, come together to achieve a national governability pact, what we talk about is having the content of that pact, in a sense, come from the local communities, and that the effort to achieve a governability pact in these different areas should be developed from dialogue at the local communities and then become part of the national consensus. And as I say, it has been done in a series of other countries in Latin America.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
That's a very good question. We argue it every day in my office. Because obviously the fact that elections haven't happened for 2 years. Oh, yes. He's saying, well, why haven't elections? Who benefits from this impasse of not holding elections, I believe? Is that your question? And that's a very good question, one we all argue with. And I don't know. You can make a case that for just about any faction in Haiti, why they would want to have the elections or why they wouldn't. And you hear them all, the rumor mill and others. You go down and talk to the parliamentarians, it's the president who's holding it up. You talk to the president, he says it's the parliamentarians. I think at times, frankly, both sides have felt it would be an advantage to delay the elections for various reasons and have done so. I don't think it's always been a clean division of on this, but I don't really know the answer. But I'm sure Ambassador Joseph does.
I don't know whether people will agree with my answer. However, if you see who is getting more power in Haiti, it is the executive. And right now we have interim executive agents throughout the country. So as long as these executive agents stay in power and get the money, they may be able to build up some support and keep themselves in power. So in my book, the executive branch is benefiting just by having its own people throughout the administration in the country. And they come from anywhere and impose on the community.
All right. I think that that Ambassador Joseph sort of identified key individuals and groups who don't want to see elections. There are 129 appointed municipal sort of mayors of the 140 communes. Those appointed individuals do not want to see elections held, clearly. Their jobs and incomes are put at risk. That's one. The second is that the current balance of power within the Congress is one in which the President Martelly has managed to get a very slight majority in the chamber of deputies. But the Senate at the moment has an opposition majority of the 20 senators. There are those who do not want to see an election held because they suspect that the government is likely to obtain a substantial number of those 10 senators. There also are those who fear that Lavalas will take a majority of those 10 seats. And then remember, there's another 10 seats that will come up for election as of November, or should. And so, again, the balance of power within the parliament is what is currently at risk. And those who believe they know that they have a better deal today than tomorrow don't want to see elections. And there are business linkages and economic linkages to all of those. And they, too, are making their bets on whether maintaining the current situation or holding elections is in their interests. Some are clearly opting against holding the elections.
I think this brings us to the end of this meeting. I'm struck by a couple of thoughts. There is a Haitian proverb that tipa tipa na prive. Little by little, small steps will arrive. From what I've heard of this panel, I don't know that those small steps have always gone forward. It's more like a tango, back and forth. Which brings me to my second thought, the always prescient Molière, who said, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. It seems like I've had this meeting before on repeated occasions over the past 25 years. Let's hope that something's going to happen so we don't have to have this meeting again. But again, Bob Perito, I hope that we will have at least one meeting after these elections, whenever they are held, and maybe we can get the same panelists back, and then maybe we can do a post-mortem. I thank all of you for coming today, and I thank you for maintaining your interest in Haiti, and we will see you the next time.